My wife looked at me and said, "If you loved me, you'd accept it." I asked, "Accept what?" She crossed her arms and said, "The fact that this is happening, whether you like it or not." I nodded and said, "Okay." 4 months later, she was sitting across from me asking why I had stopped fighting for our marriage. The truth was simple. I wasn't fighting anymore because I finally understood what I had been fighting against. When I married Lauren, I thought I was marrying someone ambitious. And to be fair, she was. That was one of the things I admired about her. She was confident, driven, outgoing, the kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 10 new friends. I was the opposite, more reserved, more practical. I ran a small commercial maintenance company and spent most of my time working. Our personalities balanced each other, at least in the beginning. The first couple of years were good. Nothing spectacular, just normal. We bought a house, built routines, talked about having kids someday. The problems didn't start all at once. They arrived gradually, small enough to ignore, small enough to explain away. The first red flag appeared whenever Lauren didn't get her way. She wasn't aggressive. She wasn't loud. She simply dismissed people. If a restaurant got her order wrong, she'd spend 10 minutes explaining why everyone else was incompetent. If a friend disagreed with her, she'd stop talking to them for weeks. At first I saw it as stubbornness. Then I realized it was something else. Lauren genuinely struggled with hearing the word no. The second red flag involved her best friend, Megan. Megan had a habit of reinforcing every bad decision Lauren made. No matter what happened, Megan always found a way to make Lauren the victim. If Lauren argued with a coworker, Megan blamed the coworker. If Lauren upset a family member, Megan blamed the family member. If Lauren and I disagreed, Megan somehow blamed me. I didn't think much of it initially. Everybody has that one friend. The problem was how much influence Megan had. Lauren treated her opinions like facts. A few years into our marriage, Lauren started talking about leaving her job. That wasn't unusual. Lots of people change careers. I supported the idea. What concerned me was that she didn't have a plan. One week, she wanted to start an online business. The next week, she wanted to become a consultant. Then it was real estate. Then social media. The ideas changed constantly. Whenever I suggested slowing down and planning carefully, she became defensive. "You never support me." That sentence started appearing more and more. At first, I apologized. Then I started noticing a pattern. Support meant agreement. Anything less became opposition. One evening, she came home excited about a business seminar she'd attended with Megan. For nearly an hour, she talked about financial freedom, passive income, entrepreneurship, the usual buzzwords. I listened, asked questions, tried to understand. Eventually, I asked a simple question. How much would this cost? The room went quiet. Lauren immediately looked annoyed. Why do you always focus on money? I blinked. Because we're talking about spending money. That conversation ended with me apologizing. Looking back, I still don't know why. The third red flag arrived shortly afterward. Lauren began making decisions first and informing me later. Not asking, informing. She'd commit to trips, large purchases, events, memberships, then tell me afterward. Whenever I questioned it, she'd accuse me of being controlling. The strange thing was that she never accepted the same behavior from me. If I made a decision without consulting her, she'd be furious. The double standard was impossible to miss. But I kept convincing myself it wasn't serious. Marriage requires compromise. Marriage requires patience. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Then came the fourth red flag. Lauren started discussing private parts of our marriage with Megan. Everything. Arguments, finances, disagreements, personal conversations. I only discovered it accidentally. One day Megan referenced a discussion that had happened inside my own home. A discussion she'd never been present for. I asked Lauren about it later. She shrugged. Megan's my best friend. That doesn't mean every conversation becomes public. She rolled her eyes. There you go again. That became another familiar phrase. There you go again. As if having boundaries was somehow unreasonable. The situation escalated 6 months later. Lauren announced she wanted to quit her job. Not eventually. Immediately. No replacement income. No business revenue. No transition plan. Just quit. I asked reasonable questions. How long would our savings last? What was the timeline? What were the goals? Instead of answering, she became irritated. Then Megan got involved. According to Megan, I was being negative, unsupportive, fear-driven. Lauren repeated those exact words to me, word for word. That's when I realized I wasn't discussing our future with my wife anymore. I was debating two people at once. Still, I tried to be supportive. I helped create budgets, reviewed plans, offered suggestions. Every effort was dismissed because Lauren didn't want collaboration. She wanted approval. Then everything changed one Saturday afternoon. Lauren came home carrying folders and paperwork. She looked excited, almost relieved. I asked what happened. She smiled. I signed the papers. What papers? The investment agreement. My stomach dropped. What investment agreement? She sat down casually, like she was discussing groceries. The business partnership. I stared at her. What partnership? That's when she explained that she and Megan had invested a large portion of our savings into a business venture, without discussing it with me, without consulting me, without asking. I sat there trying to process what I was hearing. Then I asked the obvious question. Why wouldn't you talk to me first? Lauren's expression hardened instantly. And then she delivered the sentence that changed everything. If you loved me, you'd accept it. The room went completely silent. And for the first time in our marriage, I realized this wasn't about money. It wasn't about business. It wasn't even about Megan. It was about respect. And mine had apparently become optional. After Lauren said it, I didn't yell. I didn't slam a door. I didn't launch into a speech about trust and marriage. I just sat there, trying to understand how we had reached a point where my wife thought risking our savings without even discussing it was normal. Eventually, I asked, how much? She immediately looked uncomfortable. That told me everything. When someone spends $5,000, they answer quickly. When someone spends significantly more, they hesitate. Lauren looked away. 30,000. For a moment, I genuinely thought I'd heard her wrong. 30,000. It's an investment. That's almost half our savings. She crossed her arms. See, this is exactly why I didn't want to tell you beforehand. I stared at her. The issue wasn't the money anymore. The issue was that she believed my reaction justified hiding it. That was the first major gaslighting moment. She made a unilateral decision, then blamed me for not being consulted. The logic made no sense. But over time, I'd noticed something. The goal wasn't solving problems. The goal was avoiding accountability. Over the next few weeks, I tried to understand the business. I asked questions. What was the product? Who were the customers? What were the projected revenues? Lauren either didn't know the answers or became irritated when I asked. Every conversation ended the same way. You don't believe in me. That sentence became her shield. If I questioned the plan, I didn't believe in her. If I asked for details, I didn't support her. If I expressed concern, I was holding her back. The actual concerns never got addressed. Everything became a referendum on my loyalty. Then Megan started showing up more often. At first, it was occasional. Then it became constant. Dinner conversations, weekend plans, business meetings, phone calls. It felt like Megan was becoming a third person in our marriage. One evening, I came home from work and found both of them sitting at the kitchen table reviewing documents. Lauren smiled. Perfect timing. I looked at the paperwork. What's this? We decided to expand. My stomach sank. Where? Lauren nodded. Megan and I. I noticed something. Neither of them had asked what I thought. Neither of them cared. The decision had already been made. I was simply being informed. Again. That night, I told Lauren we needed to have a serious conversation. For the first time in months, I was completely honest. I don't feel like a partner anymore. She rolled her eyes immediately. What does that even mean? It means major decisions keep happening without me. It's my business. It's our savings. That distinction mattered. Apparently only to me. Lauren sighed dramatically. You always make everything negative. I remember feeling exhausted. Not angry. Exhausted. Because every discussion followed the same script. Problem. Deflection. Blame. Repeat. A few days later, I discovered something else. The original investment wasn't 30,000. It was closer to 45. I found out by accident while organizing tax documents. At first I assumed there was a mistake. Then I confronted Lauren. Why did you tell me 30? She looked annoyed. Because that's what I remembered. I held up the paperwork. It wasn't 30. It doesn't matter. That response hit harder than the lie. Not because of the money. Because she genuinely believed honesty was optional if the truth was inconvenient. The trust between us started disappearing after that. Not all at once. Gradually. Quietly. Like water leaking from a container. You don't notice it immediately. Then one day you realize almost nothing is left. Around that time, the business began having problems. Deadlines were missed. Expenses were growing. Clients weren't materializing. The numbers weren't adding up. I tried to help. Not because I agreed with the decision. Because we were married. If the business failed, we'd both feel the impact. But every suggestion was treated like criticism. Every concern became negativity. Every question became an attack. Meanwhile, Megan continued validating everything, even when the evidence said otherwise. One evening, I overheard a conversation between them. Lauren was worried about cash flow. For the first time, she sounded genuinely concerned. Megan's response was immediate. Don't listen to your husband. He's always doubting you. That sentence stayed with me because it explained everything. Lauren wasn't receiving advice. She was receiving permission. Permission to ignore reality. Permission to avoid responsibility. Permission to blame someone else when things went wrong. And I had become the designated villain. The emotional exhaustion reached a new level after that. I stopped bringing up concerns, stopped asking questions, stopped offering solutions. Not because I didn't care, because nothing I said mattered. The outcome was always the same. I was wrong before I opened my mouth. Then came the discovery that changed my perspective completely. It happened during a conversation with Lauren's brother. We'd always gotten along well. Unlike most people in the family, he was straightforward. At one point, he casually mentioned something. She's always been like this. I looked at him. What do you mean? He laughed. Lauren. I stayed quiet. He continued. Growing up, nobody could tell her no. The stories started coming out. School issues, family conflicts, friendship problems. Every situation followed the same pattern. Lauren made a decision. Someone questioned it. Lauren got upset. The family eventually gave in. Not because she was right, because arguing was exhausting. Suddenly, years of confusion started making sense. This wasn't new behavior. It wasn't stress. It wasn't Megan. Megan amplified it, but she didn't create it. This was a lifelong pattern. For years, I'd treated every conflict like an isolated incident. Now I understood the truth. The issue wasn't one investment. The issue wasn't one argument. The issue wasn't one bad decision. The issue was a belief. Lauren genuinely believed that disagreement was disloyalty. And because of that belief, accountability became impossible. That realization changed something inside me. I stopped trying to fix the relationship. Not consciously. I simply stopped believing that effort would matter. Then the business situation deteriorated rapidly. Several major expenses hit at once. Revenue failed to appear. The partnership became strained. For the first time, Lauren started showing signs of panic. But even then, accountability never arrived. The blame shifted everywhere else. The economy, the market, the clients, the timing, me, especially me. One night, she walked into the living room holding a stack of financial reports. She looked frustrated, exhausted, angry, and somehow, despite everything, she still managed to make me the problem. This would be easier if you were supportive. I looked up from my laptop. Supportive how? By believing in me. I nodded slowly. I believed in you. She frowned. No, you didn't. I helped with budgets. Silence. I helped with planning. More silence. I tried to discuss risks. Now she was visibly irritated, because facts were getting in the way of the narrative. Then came the ultimatum. The moment everything finally broke. Lauren threw the reports onto the table. If you're going to keep acting like this, maybe we shouldn't be married. The room became completely silent. I looked at her. Years earlier, after that conversation, Lauren expected a fight. I could tell. For years, every major disagreement had followed the same pattern. She pushed. I explained. She got defensive. I tried harder. Eventually, I compromised. That cycle had become normal. This time, it didn't happen. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to convince her that our marriage was worth saving. I simply stopped. And that confused her more than any confrontation ever could. The next few days felt strange. We still lived in the same house. Still crossed paths every morning. Still sat in the same rooms. But something had changed. I wasn't angry. I wasn't cold. I was detached. When Lauren complained, I listened. When she criticized me, I didn't engage. When she tried to start arguments, I answered with short sentences. Okay. I understand. That's your opinion. The less I chased, the more uncomfortable she became. A week later, she finally asked, "Why are you acting like this?" I looked at her. Like what? Like you don't care. I thought about that for a second. Then I answered honestly. I care. I just don't think arguing changes anything anymore. For the first time, she had no response. That silence told me everything. Because deep down, she knew I was right. A few days later, I met with an attorney. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I wanted to punish Lauren. Because I needed clarity. For years, I'd been carrying responsibility for decisions I didn't make. I wasn't going to keep doing that. The attorney reviewed everything. Joint accounts, investments, property, documentation. When I left that meeting, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, not happiness. Peace, because uncertainty was finally disappearing. Then come wave one arrived. The business officially started collapsing. A major vendor pulled out. Several invoices remained unpaid. Projected revenue never materialized. A partnership that had sounded so exciting months earlier suddenly looked very different. Lauren came home one evening looking exhausted. For the first time, there was no confidence. No speeches about vision. No accusations. Just frustration. She sat at the kitchen table and stared into space. I remember feeling sorry for her. Not because she lost money. Because she had spent so much time protecting her ego that she couldn't learn from anyone trying to help. A few days later, she finally asked, "Do you think the business can recover?" It was probably the most honest question she'd asked me in months. I answered honestly, "I don't know." She nodded. Neither of us said anything else. The reality was finally speaking louder than either of us. Then came the first clue. A mutual friend mentioned that Megan had quietly started distancing herself from the business. At first, I didn't think much about it. Then more information surfaced. Meetings were being cancelled. Calls weren't being returned. Responsibilities were shifting. Lauren was suddenly carrying almost everything herself. The person who had encouraged every decision was slowly disappearing. That led to proof. A few weeks later, Lauren discovered emails showing Megan had known about several financial problems months earlier. Problems she'd never disclosed. Instead of addressing them, she continued encouraging expansion. Continued pushing risk. Continued telling Lauren everything would work out. When Lauren confronted her, Megan blamed everyone else. The economy. The market. Timing. Anything except herself. Hearing that wasn't satisfying. It was predictable. Because people who encourage bad decisions rarely stick around for the consequences. Then came the witness. Lauren's brother called me one evening. We talked for nearly an hour. Near the end of the conversation, he said something simple. "She finally understands what you've been dealing with." I didn't respond immediately. He continued. For the first time, somebody told her exactly what she wanted to hear, and it blew up. That sentence stayed with me, because it perfectly explained what had happened. Lauren spent years surrounding herself with people who validated her. Not people who challenged her. Not people who helped her grow. People who made her feel right. And eventually, reality sent the bill. Then came confirmation. About 2 months after our ultimatum conversation, Lauren asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed. Not because I wanted reconciliation. Because I wanted closure. When I arrived, she looked different. Not physically. Emotionally. The certainty was gone. The confidence that she'd always been right had disappeared. We talked for nearly an hour. Mostly about practical things. Then eventually, she looked down and said, "I owe you an apology." I stayed quiet. She continued, "You weren't trying to control me." Another pause. "You were trying to protect us." For years, I'd wanted her to understand that. Now that she finally did, it felt strangely unimportant. Not because I didn't appreciate it. Because I had already accepted reality. She kept talking. I thought support meant agreement. I nodded. Yeah. And when you disagreed with me, I treated it like betrayal. That was the moment of realization. Not mine. Hers. For the first time, accountability appeared without excuses attached to it. No blame shifting. No gaslighting. No rewriting history. Just ownership. Unfortunately, Some lessons arrive after the damage is done. Then came karma, wave 2. The social consequences. Several mutual friends learned what had actually happened with the investment. Not from me, from Lauren. And the reactions weren't what she expected. People weren't impressed by independence. They weren't celebrating risk-taking. Most of them focused on one thing: the fact that major financial decisions had been hidden from a spouse. Even people who liked Lauren struggled to defend that. The support she'd always counted on started shrinking. Not dramatically, just quietly. And quiet consequences tend to last longer. Then came karma, wave 3. The emotional consequence. Months after our separation began, Lauren called me. There was no emergency, no crisis, no specific reason. She simply wanted to talk. During that conversation, she said something that explained everything. I never thought you'd actually leave. There it was. The belief underneath every argument. The assumption underneath every boundary violation. She genuinely believed there was no limit. No line she could cross. No behavior that would make me walk away. Because I'd tolerated so much for so long. And honestly, she wasn't completely wrong. I had tolerated too much. The difference was that eventually I stopped. As for me, life became quieter. The legal process moved forward. The business continued growing. I spent more time with friends, more time with family, more time focusing on things that actually brought peace into my life. There was no dramatic revenge, no movie ending, no moment where everyone applauded. Just something better. Self-respect. The kind that comes from finally enforcing a boundary you should have enforced